In our last video, we talked about all the icons on the top of 3ds Max, what they do, how we can use them. We talked about how we can move around in our screen, and we talked about how we can move objects in our screen. So today, let's talk about our cameras, and let's talk about these tabs here. By default, when we open up 3ds Max, we should see 4 panes: top, front, left, and perspective. If I create an object, I should be able to see that object in all 4 views. Now, in these other ones, they might be wireframe, and here in our perspective, we see that it's realistic. If we want to change that, we can click where it says wireframe and change it to whatever we want. So let's choose realistic here. Maybe here we'll choose shaded. Maybe here we'll choose stylized pastel. Okay. So we can view several different ways. The good thing about this is that we can see our scene in several different angles. The thing that might make it more difficult is now, one, we have 4 views, and two, our work area is a lot smaller. What I would recommend personally, or a lot of times, I would recommend working in just one view, unless we're in something like a camera where we're trying to get a camera view just the way we want it, we need to move objects, then here it would be beneficial to us, and I can show you that in this video. It wouldn't be too difficult. But what I would recommend is working in one view. To do that, you can come down to the lower right-hand corner of our screen. Now we have this button. We mouse over, it says Maximize Viewport Toggle. It's going to maximize whatever viewport we have selected or active. And we know which one is active because we have this little border around it. So if we look in perspective, I have this little orangish yellow border, brownish, meaning this is active. If I click in front, now I have that border there. So it's going to toggle whichever one I have active. So I'm going to click on that. What I can see is now I'm just in that view and I'm as big as I can get. If I want to go back, then again, I can click on that maximize viewport toggle and it will take me back to my 4 view. I told you that it would be helpful if we have a camera in our scene and we have 4 views. So let me do that real quick. I'll go to camera. I'll just create a simple little target camera and maybe move this camera back a little bit. Okay. So if I want to be in my camera, I can either come up to perspective and choose cameras, camera 01, which is the name of my camera by default because I didn't name anything else, or I can just hit C. So I can see what my camera is. But if I want to adjust my camera, I can't rotate from the camera itself. Instead, go to my maximize viewport. I'll select that camera. And now not only can I adjust my camera in another view, I can also see the result in my camera view. Maybe move that target up a little bit. Okay. We have different views that we can go to, like we talked about with our camera or perspective, which I would recommend working in perspective view and not orthographic view. But we also have perspective view, orthographic, top, bottom, front, left, back, right. You can get to these. Shortcut key is V on your keyboard. So V for viewports. That's an easy way to get to them. Okay, so we've talked about different viewports and some ways that we could use some of them. But I wanted to go over these icons here, these tabs. The first one, if we hover over, looks like a sun, and it's called the Create tab. And from here, most everything that we want to create, keep in mind that I said most everything, not everything, but most everything we want to create, we would do through the Create tab. And here we have sub icons. So for my Create tab, I have geometry, shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps, and systems. And each one of these, if I were to click on Create Geometry, I have several different things that I can subcategories there. So in my standard primitives, I have box, sphere, cylinder, so on and so forth. But if I choose my drop down, there are other that I can do. So extended primitives, here I've got Hydra, so on and so forth. If I choose doors, then I have doors that I can create. Same with shapes. I have splines by default, but if I want to do NURBS or expanded splines, lights, cameras, helpers, and eventually, given enough time, you will have experience in each one of these things, but we're definitely not going to try to go over all of them in this video. There's just too many. Okay, so Create tab. Most everything that we can create can be created through our Create tab. Next to our Create tab is called our Modify. Once we create an object and we want to change it or modify it, we can do so through the Modify tab. So right now I have nothing in my Modify tab because I don't have anything selected. But if I choose my box, now I see parameters that I can change or modify in the Modify tab. The same as if we do, say, a light. So let's create a standard light in Omni. If I want to change the parameters of that light, if I want to modify it after I've created it, I can go to my Modify tab. If I don't have it selected, I won't see it, but if I have it selected, now I have all the parameters of that light that I can change. Okay, so we've talked about the Create tab, the Modify tab, and next let's talk about the Hierarchy tab. And a lot of the things in this tab are a little bit more in depth than what you would normally see, but there are some things that we can change. If I select on my box, for example, I can see that my transform is at the bottom and center of my box. But if I wanted to change that for whatever reason, I can do that through the Hierarchy tab under Adjust Pivot. So if I affect the pivot only and align it to the center of the object, now I can see that my transform is in the center of my object. Next to pivot, we have IK, which we won't really talk about, and then link info, which we won't talk about too much either, but well, we can. What this does is if we have it linked to another object, do we want it to inherit the movement, rotate, or scale of the object? Here, like we're saying, yes, inherit all of it. Or if we want to lock, let's say, for example, we only want it to be able to move on the z-axis. So if I try to move it on the x or the y, it won't, but I can on the z because I don't have that one locked. Okay, go to the Motion tab. Motion tab, we can assign new controllers, which is definitely more complicated than we're going to get into, or more in depth than we're going to get into in this video. This tab is used a lot for biped and its animation sets, which we're not going to go into again. We're just going into kind of what these tabs can do for us. And then our display, we have, so for example, if I want to hide an item by category, so I want to hide all my geometry. So I click on geometry and now it's hidden. Or if I want to hide all my lights, that type of thing. If we want to hide by name, so if I hide by name, then I have a little box that will come up and I can hide whatever I want by its name. We also have display properties. So if I were to select this box and say that I want you to show me trajectories, which are really good for animation. So if I animate this now, we should see a red line. This red line is the trajectory. And if I come in here and maybe move this up, we can see that my trajectory now shows the movement of my object. This is awesome when you're doing animation. So that's what our motion or our display tab does. And then our utilities, by default, we have a couple of utilities that we can use in 3ds Max. So if I want to reset the X form, which is like if my transforms get all messed up, or if my scale, I increase my scale to 10, but I want it to be reset to 1, I can do that with my reset X form. If I want to add utilities, I can do that with a list of utilities. If I want to add more buttons, then I can say, hey, instead of 9 buttons, I want 10 buttons. And then I have an extra button down here I can assign something to, that type of thing. So we have a short little video talking about our tabs here. Basically what they do, and in some cases what we can use them for. But hopefully this will be helpful when we're trying to learn the basics of 3ds Max. What I would invite you to do is to play around with all these tabs. To go in and see what is a helper, what is a dummy, what is particle flow. To come in and play around with these and try to figure out what they do. We will have other videos that will go over more things in depth, but for right now, just kind of have fun with it. So until then,